What if I told you that everything you've ever wanted, everything you've ever dreamed of having, is actually designed to make you miserable? What if the very act of desiring something guarantees your suffering, and getting it guarantees your boredom? This isn't some modern self-help guru talking. This is the brutal truth revealed by one of history's most brilliant and darkest philosophers, Arthur Schopenhauer. Right now, as you're watching this video, you're probably holding a device worth hundreds of dollars. A year ago, maybe two, you desperately wanted this exact phone, this exact computer. You saved money for it, you researched it, you dreamed about having it. And now? Now it's just another object gathering digital dust in your pocket, isn't it? You're already thinking about the next upgrade, the next model, the next thing that will finally make you happy. This is what Schopenhauer called the pendulum of human existence. We swing endlessly between the pain of wanting and the emptiness of having. And in our modern world of social media and instant gratification, this pendulum swings faster and more violently than ever before. Schopenhauer believed that life is essentially suffering, and that suffering comes from what he called the will, a blind, irrational force that drives all existence. This will manifests in humans as desire, as craving, as the relentless need to want something more. But here's the twist that makes Schopenhauer's philosophy so devastatingly accurate. Even when we get what we want, we don't escape suffering. We just trade the pain of wanting for what he called the boredom of possessing. Think about your social media habits for a moment. How many hours do you spend scrolling through Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube every day? The average American spends 4 hours daily on social media. That's 1,160 hours per year, which means in 50 years, you'll have spent 9 entire years of your life staring at a screen, consuming content you'll never remember, chasing digital validation you'll never truly receive. But why do we do this? Schopenhauer would say it's because we can't bear to be alone with ourselves. We can't tolerate the silence, the emptiness that comes when we're not actively wanting something. Modern neuroscience supports this. Research shows that boredom triggers our brains to seek stimulation, often leading to compulsive behaviors like smartphone use. We've become addicted to the very thing that's making us miserable. Let me paint you a picture that Schopenhauer would recognize instantly. You're at a restaurant, and instead of enjoying the meal, the company, the moment, you're taking photos of your food. You're crafting the perfect caption. You're performing happiness for an audience of strangers who are doing exactly the same thing. You've turned a moment of potential joy into another performance in the theater of social validation. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said that desire is never satisfied. It only shifts its target. You don't really want that perfect Instagram post. You want the feeling you think it will give you. But that feeling is always just out of reach, like trying to catch your own shadow. The philosopher noticed something that modern psychology has confirmed. We're never actually happy in the present moment when we're driven by desire. Think about it. When you're craving something, are you happy? No. You're anxious, restless, focused on what you lack. And when you get it, for maybe a few minutes or hours, there's pleasure. But then what? Then comes the boredom, the emptiness, the immediate search for the next thing to want. Schopenhauer observed that we take no pleasure in existence except when we're striving after something. And even then, it's an illusion. We think that getting the promotion, buying the car, finding the relationship will finally make us happy. But happiness isn't the reward for getting what we want. It's just the temporary absence of wanting. This is why wealthy people aren't necessarily happier than poor people. This is why celebrities, despite having everything we think we want, often struggle with depression and addiction. This is why every generation thinks they'll be the one to finally figure out how to be satisfied, only to pass the same restless dissatisfaction on to their children. But here's where it gets even more insidious in our modern world. We're not just trapped in our own cycle of wanting and boredom. We're trapped in everyone else's too. Every time you open social media, You're bombarded with other people's curated versions of success, happiness, and fulfillment. You see their new car, their vacation photos, their relationship milestones, and your mind immediately starts comparing, wanting, craving what they appear to have. The ancient Stoics had a word for this kind of suffering. They called it the hedonic treadmill. No matter how fast you run, no matter how much you achieve, you never actually get anywhere. You just exhaust yourself chasing an horizon that keeps receding. Schopenhauer's genius was recognizing that this isn't a bug in the human system, it's a feature. The will doesn't care about your happiness, it only cares about perpetuating itself. It keeps you wanting, keeps you striving, keeps you reproducing and consuming and competing, because that's what serves life's blind drive to continue existing. But if this sounds hopeless, if this sounds like a prison sentence to eternal misery, don't despair yet. Schopenhauer didn't just diagnose the problem, he also pointed toward the cure. And in the second part of this video, we're going to explore his radical solutions for escaping this cycle of craving and boredom. We're going to discover why some of history's greatest artists, philosophers, and spiritual teachers all arrived at similar conclusions about how to find genuine peace. We're going to examine the science behind why certain practices can actually free us from the tyranny of constant wanting. And we're going to learn practical techniques that you can implement today to start breaking free from the pendulum of suffering that has defined human existence for millennia. But Schopenhauer didn't leave us trapped in this cycle of suffering. He discovered something revolutionary that modern neuroscience has now validated. There are specific states of consciousness where the will temporarily ceases its relentless demands. These moments of liberation aren't just philosophical theories. They're measurable, achievable experiences that can transform your relationship with desire forever. The first path Schopenhauer identified was through aesthetic contemplation. When you become completely absorbed in a work of art, a piece of music, or a beautiful sunset, something extraordinary happens. Your sense of individual will, that voice constantly demanding more, better, different, temporarily disappears. You're no longer the person who wants things. You become pure perception, pure awareness. Modern brain imaging confirms this. When people experience what researchers call aesthetic rapture, there's a measurable decrease in activity in the brain's default mode network, the same network responsible for self-referential thinking and desire. The voice in your head that's always comparing, wanting, judging, literally quiets down. This isn't mystical nonsense, it's measurable neuroscience. Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in something beautiful. Maybe it was a piece of music that gave you chills, or a moment in nature where you forgot about time. In that moment, were you thinking about your social media notifications? Were you craving your next purchase? Were you bored? Of course not. You had temporarily escaped the pendulum of wanting and having. But Schopenhauer's most radical insight was about compassion. He realized that suffering isn't personal, it's universal. Every human being, regardless of their wealth, status, or achievements, is trapped in the same cycle of desire and dissatisfaction. When you truly understand this, when you see through the illusion that other people have somehow escaped the human condition, something profound shifts. The billionaire obsessing over his next acquisition is suffering. The Instagram influencer desperately seeking validation is suffering. Your neighbor posting perfect family photos is suffering. They're all trapped in the same prison of wanting that you are. This recognition doesn't make you feel superior. It makes you feel connected to the fundamental experience of being human. Research in social psychology supports this. Studies show that people who practice what researchers call common humanity meditation, recognizing that suffering is part of the shared human experience, show significant decreases in anxiety, depression, and social comparison behaviors. They spend less time on social media and report greater life satisfaction. But here's where Schopenhauer's philosophy becomes practical for your daily life. He taught that we can cultivate these moments of freedom. You don't have to wait for them to accidentally happen. You can train your mind to step outside the cycle of craving and boredom. Start with something simple. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, spend 5 minutes looking out a window. Not thinking about your day, not planning, not wanting, just looking. Notice the play of light, the movement of clouds, the way shadows fall. This is aesthetic contemplation in practice. You're training your consciousness to exist without the constant demand for something more. Or try this. The next time you eat, put your phone in another room. Eat slowly, paying attention to taste, texture, temperature. This isn't about mindful eating for health benefits. This is about escaping the will's demand for constant stimulation. You're proving to yourself that you can exist peacefully in the present moment without needing to consume content, check messages, or seek entertainment. Schopenhauer also discovered that physical asceticism, voluntary simplicity, could break the spell of desire. This doesn't mean becoming a monk, but it does mean experimenting with deliberately having less. Try going a day without buying anything unnecessary. Try wearing the same outfit for a week. Try eating simple meals. Notice how your mind reacts when it can't immediately gratify every impulse. Modern psychology calls this voluntary discomfort training, and research shows it significantly increases emotional resilience and decreases materialism. When you prove to yourself that you can be content with less, the consumer culture loses its power over you. But perhaps Schopenhauer's most powerful technique was contemplating the universality of suffering. The next time you feel envious of someone's success, their possessions, their apparent happiness, pause and remember. They too are trapped in the cycle of wanting and boredom. That perfect Instagram life? It's performance hiding the same restless dissatisfaction you feel. This isn't cynicism, it's liberation. When you stop believing that other people have access to some special happiness that you lack, you stop chasing their external markers of success. You stop comparing your internal experience to their external performance. The ancient Buddhists had a practice called loving-kindness meditation that Schopenhauer would have recognized. Instead of seeing other people as competitors in the game of acquisition and status, you learn to see them as fellow sufferers deserving of compassion. This fundamentally changes how you relate to social media, to consumer culture, to the whole apparatus designed to make you feel inadequate. But here's the most radical part of Schopenhauer's teaching. True happiness isn't the presence of pleasure. It's the absence of wanting. Most people never experience this because they're afraid of boredom, afraid of silence, afraid of being alone with themselves without distraction. But what if boredom isn't the enemy? What if those moments of emptiness, of not wanting anything, are actually glimpses of freedom? What if the peace you're seeking isn't found in getting what you want, but in no longer needing to want? Try this experiment. Set aside 30 minutes with no devices, no books, no distractions. Just sit quietly and let yourself be bored. Notice how your mind immediately starts generating desires for entertainment, for stimulation, for something to do. Instead of giving in, just observe these impulses without acting on them. What you'll discover is that beneath the surface agitation, beneath the constant need for more, there's a profound stillness. This is what Schopenhauer called the denial of the will to live. Not suicide, but the recognition that you don't need to be driven by desire to exist peacefully. Modern neuroscience has found that people who regularly practice this kind of non-doing show increased activity in brain regions associated with well-being and decreased activity in regions associated with craving and addiction. They literally rewire their brains away from the cycle of wanting and boredom. The practical implications are enormous. Imagine checking social media not compulsively, but consciously. Imagine buying things not because advertising triggered your insecurities, but because you actually need them. Imagine relating to other people not as competitors or sources of validation, but as fellow travelers in the human experience. This isn't about becoming passive or unmotivated. Schopenhauer himself was incredibly productive. It's about distinguishing between action that comes from wisdom and action that comes from compulsion. It's about creating instead of consuming, connecting instead of competing, being instead of having. The cycle of craving and boredom that defines modern life isn't inevitable. It's a choice you make every time you pick up your phone seeking stimulation, every time you buy something you don't need, every time you measure your worth against someone else's possessions or achievements. Schopenhauer showed us that freedom is possible, not through getting everything you want, but through understanding the futility of wanting itself. In a world designed to keep you perpetually dissatisfied, perpetually consuming, perpetually comparing, this understanding is the ultimate rebellion. The question isn't whether you'll escape the pendulum of wanting and boredom. The question is when you'll decide you've suffered enough to try something different. The tools are here. The path is clear. The only thing standing between you and genuine peace is your attachment to the very desires that are making you miserable. Choose wisdom over wanting. Choose presence over possession. Choose the radical freedom that comes from no longer needing the world to be different than it is.